McLaren's Lando Norris won in Miami, and Max Verstappen narrowly beat him at Imola, which leaves the question, is Red Bull's car still the fastest in Formula 1, and are they in trouble now that they're not able to make further speed gains in recent times? Red Bull's big edge over its competitors in Formula 1 for the last couple of years allowed it to take its time with modifications, opting for fewer, frequent but larger steps. However, as McLaren and Ferrari have moved in on the Milton Keynes-based team, it is under pressure to guarantee that no performance is left on the table. And, with less than a tenth of a second between pole position and off the front row in Imola, Red Bull knows it must throw all it has at it immediately to prevent slipping behind. Also, let's not forget the increased race pace from McLaren, which were at times better than Red Bull's in Imola. And Ferrari's Sundays are also getting better each weekend. So, have Red Bull been too conservative in their upgrade path? And do they still have something left for their RB20? Or are they becoming sitting ducks? To counter the fact that the other teams are catching up, they came to Imola with a handful of new RB20 components designed to address some of the car's shortcomings. The car had a new front wing with a reworked flap configuration, which also changed the nose. To boost the stress created by the assembly, the team expanded the chord length of the upper two flaps' movable sections. The chord and angle of attack changed between the two specifications, since the sponsorship logo is more prominent in the new design. To assist this, the permanent parts alongside the nose and the nose itself have been redesigned, as have the stalks that the camera pods rest on after it, so that they function in tandem with the new flow regime. The wing's outer extremities have also been fettled, with the leading edge of the end plate changed, affecting the rest of the surface and exposing the dive plane to a redesigned flow regime. Meanwhile, the team improved the design of its floor and edge wings, reconfiguring the raised SIS cover part of the floor to increase flow both above and below the surface. Taking use of the new paths, the edge wing has been gently redesigned, with the shedding surfaces underneath the element moved. The rear brake duct was also redesigned to enhance efficiency, resulting in the reconfiguration of the winglets piled around it. But still, with all these upgrades, Verstappen was only able to win by 0.7 seconds, which prompts the following question. Is Red Bull at the end of the development road in this current era? Or are McLaren and Ferrari just better at unlocking unrealized gains with their current platform? What do you think? The resurgence of the other teams is turning the 2024 season into a three-horse battle between Red Bull, McLaren and Ferrari, as car enhancements look to have reduced the gap between the three teams to 1 or 2 tenths at best. There is no question that Verstappen and Red Bull are still in a strong position to win both titles, but with more than 2/3 of the season remaining, recent surges by Ferrari and particularly McLaren have injected some much-needed life into the competitive order. However, although Norris was assisted by the safety car in Miami, he and Oscar Piastri were on track to provide a front row for McLaren in Imola, only for Verstappen to obtain a tow from Nico Hülkenberg. That small assistance from his friend provided a greater lift than the 0.074 and 0.091 second deficits to the McLaren. Given how tough it was to pass at Imola, perhaps the roles of hunter and prey should have been reversed, and Norris's late speed in the race shows Red Bull is now seriously under pressure. But does this imply Red Bull has finally been caught? Its free practice troubles at Imola were well chronicled, and Norris's late recovery was as much due to his excellent driving and superb tyre management as Verstappen's hard tyres lowering in temperature. And let's not forget that Red Bull were having a really bad weekend with their setup. I think for the first 40 laps we were in a really good window, and he would have managed the gap, Red Bull team boss Christian Horner said. The recovery from Friday to Saturday was very strong, and what we managed to achieve on the medium tyre was very strong. I think we need to look at why were we weak in the second half of the stint, because it was only the second half on the hard tyre compared to Lando. The limitations surrounding the results in Miami and Imola imply that, aside from outlier Monaco, it would be smart to wait until Montreal and, in particular, F1's well-known Barcelona proving ground before drawing appropriate conclusions on whether McLaren has genuinely caught, let alone overtaken, Red Bull in pure speed. But it's evident that, with Ferrari's Charles Leclerc only 7 seconds behind, the margins are now so close that Verstappen and Red Bull can no longer just drive to victories or brute force their way out of problems elsewhere simply because they have a better car. Driver performance, car setup, strategy, sim work, race starts, pit stops and tyre management are all emerging as possible differentiators beyond the car's natural speed. The execution of the weekend is always a key factor, but when margins are so close, then clearly operations, the way you drive the tyres and the way you execute the race can become the dominant factor, McLaren team boss Andrea Stella said. Between a McLaren and a Red Bull, there wasn't much to pick and there were other factors that made the difference. Being in the dirty air seemed to be a big factor, so having pole position, being ahead in the first corner, allowed you to manage the tyres in a certain way and manage your own pace. Vasseur believes that the struggle between 2024's top 3 teams would be waged everywhere going forward. "It's good news for me, good news for F1, good news for the championship," he said. "You have 3 teams in 7 seconds after 70 laps. It's less than 1/10 a lap. The competition will be everywhere. The setup of the car will be crucial. The performance of the driver will be crucial." That's not to say that teams aren't working hard to speed up upgrades and updates, but it looks that their returns are dwindling as the restrictions reach their 3rd year. The development route is becoming an asymptote at the top of the leaderboard, as Vasseur constantly describes it. A curve that will never reach zero, but gradually flattens out over time. "We are now chasing the last hundredths," said Vasseur. "It's not anymore a 5/10th upgrade. It means that you also have to be sure that what you are bringing is working. It will be the key factor for the next couple of events." This is exactly the scenario that Red Bull predicted when it was enjoying historic domination in 2023, winning all but one race and seeming like the Milton Keynes-based squad would go unopposed until the new regulations, or at least 2025. Even early this year, it appeared that Red Bull had done enough to put competitors at bay with its daringly distinctive RB20. While Horner's words of warning were welcomed with varied degrees of skepticism, that scenario may play out sooner than most analysts anticipated. "You cannot take anything for granted, and we certainly don't," he said. "We've won 5 out of 7 races, 2 out of 2 sprint races, and 7 out of 7 poles, but the margins are fine, very fine, and in year 3 of these rules there is always going to be convergence." We are seeing exactly that. The look of the cars is converging, the performance is converging, and you can see more races like Imola with fine margins. So while Red Bull still appears to be the favourite to win, leading Ferrari by 56 points and McLaren by 114, the additional pressure has become a source of inspiration and fighting talk at Ferrari and McLaren respectively. "It's not very often that you have 6 or potentially 8 cars which could win a race," Vasseur said. "It means that when you are not in a good shape, you can move from P1 to P8 and you are scoring almost 0. It means that the championship can change after 1 or 2 weekends. Imagine that you have a crash, a DNF. It's a game changer in terms of championship. If one team is doing a 1, 2 and the other one has a DNF, then McLaren can come back or we can come back on Red Bull." It's looking more and more like things were at the end of the previous regulation era, where teams were slowly able to catch up with Mercedes in 2020, and finally one driver was able to outscore the Mercedes drivers in 2021, the last year of the regulations. Will we see history repeat itself and see a proper challenge for the title next year? Or could we already see the switch happening right now? What do you think? Or is Red Bull still hiding unrealized gains, which they'll now fast forward to make sure they will keep their advantage? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below.